Welcome back to Created Forum. I'm very excited to introduce our fifth panel. This one is political leaders and lawmakers and will be moderated by Dr. Sam Shaheem, PhD, Dean and Executive Director at Hult International Business School, London. Take it away, Sam.
Thank you very much, Tara. Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. And thank you very much for joining us today on the Created Forum. Daniel and Tara, we're grateful to you. What a great initiative to bring together such fearless females doing their part to help us all progress and make the world a better place. I couldn't think of a better way, a more meaningful way for us to spend our Sunday together in this way. So as Tara very kindly mentioned, my name is Dr. Samineh Shaheem. I'm the Dean and Executive Director of Hult International Business School, where I help thousands of postgraduate business students every year to not only develop their business competence, but also to develop their character, to make a positive impact on people and places all over the world. I've been in the space of education and psychology for the majority of my career. And I am now incredibly excited, delighted to be in the presence of such groundbreaking, boundary pushing and gracious ladies on this panel that I've been asked to moderate. So without further ado, let me introduce who we have here with us. We have Dame Fiona Woolf, DBE, and she is an energy lawyer, the 686th Lord Mayor of London, and former president of the Law Society. Welcome, Fiona.
Thank you.
And we have Peaches Golding, OBE, Her Majesty's Lord Lieutenant of the County and City of Bristol. Welcome, Peaches.
Thank you very much.
And in perfect timing, it couldn't have been scripted even better. We have the one and only Baria Alamuddin, and she's a journalist and broadcaster in the Middle East and in the UK. Thank you for joining us, Baria.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be with some lovely, lovely ladies. I'm really looking forward for this session.
Thank you. And did I pronounce your last name correctly? Can you pronounce it for me?
It's a complicated name. It's in Arabic. We have the A, so it's Alamuddin. Alamuddin is fine.
Alamuddin. Okay. No, of
Lovely.
course. I think names are very important, and we should all make more of an effort to pronounce names correctly. Absolutely. Okay. Well, I'd like to start by asking all of you a question. And that question is, you know, there's so many things that are happening worldwide. There's so many issues that keeps us pondering and reflecting over these very important topics and subjects to various degrees in different countries and across cultures. And so what I would like to ask you ladies is, what keeps you up at night? What is front and center on your mind at the moment about women's issues and women's rights and across the various cultures and industries that you work on? Could we start with Peaches, please?
Thank you. Well, there are many things that could keep one up, I think, at night. Women tend to have a very key role in keeping families together. And certainly during these times of COVID being a global pandemic, keeping families together can be really quite challenging. We've seen that schools have had to close, and therefore there's been a lot of home education. Some homes are capable of doing that because they have very skilled and talented parents who can look after them. Others have less advantages, not the least connectivity with the internet, as most work and activities is going online. So that digital divide and how it is we can have cohesive societies when we have something as significant as a digital divide in a time when we are really relying on technology. I think overall, the huge thing is the issue about gender equality. And we see that with the United Nations goal number 5 about its sustainable development goals, you know, gender, women, violence to women being something key, education for women, having women's voices in politics and finance, in the law, in other places, I guess, is the big significant issue that makes one wonder at night.
Right, right. Now, of course, thank you very much. Fiona.
Well, yes, today is the UN Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women, and I am appalled, it does keep me awake at night, that there is still so much violence against women, and that in some places of the world our sisters are caught up in something that is described by political leaders and lawmakers as part of the culture. And there's kind of an acceptance that you can't really do anything about it. What I was very sad to read by the end of our first lockdown here, the charities that look after domestic violence victims in this country are absolutely swamped. And the police were reporting huge increases in domestic violence. I mean, it is just so fundamental to society and the way that we live our lives. We can't just lie down and leave that alone. Although I think that law isn't a very good tool for a lot of the issues that we'll be talking about and have been all day, there are policies that can make a difference, and there are lots of things that we could and should be doing. And some of the work that our lovely charities have been doing, for example, on, you know, female mutilation, for example, or forced marriages, they get in there amongst it, and there just aren't enough of them, these gifted people, to help us to where we need to do it going to make progress.
Yes, yes, that's right. And I think, you know, the topic of culture, as you've introduced here, is or the variable or the element of culture is very important. It's a significant one to consider. Oftentimes it is used as a tool of keeping people where they, you know, keeping them behind or keeping them at a particular position that may not be conducive to their health and well-being. But it's a very delicate sort of balance, isn't it, to appreciate, to acknowledge, and to understand the cultural backgrounds of people of certain places, and to what extent is that then damaging them or not serving them. Female genital mutilation, as you mentioned, is an interesting one as well, because even though, you know, rules and regulations and the laws may have changed, but it is for so many centuries, if you will, or decades, so deep-rooted in the culture that even if the rules and regulations and the lawmakers get involved, unless we have addressed it more on a micro level or look at these things, you know, from an educational perspective, a familial perspective, those cultures and traditions will continue to inhibit and to hold back individuals. What do you think, you know, where should it start, do you think, Fiona, if we're not going to be focusing as much on rules and regulations?
Well, I think it has to start with the communities themselves. I mean, what's the techniques that have impressed me of where essentially these charities have gone into the communities and explained what is wrong with the culture, what the gain could be in terms of not just the education of women, but their health, and explaining that they are as important in their communities as any. Once you get a few leaders of the communities on board, they can influence other, and so peer group pressure applies. being told from the top what to do and relying on some law, it probably deals with less than 1% of it.
Right, right. And of course, it deals with the act itself, but it doesn't deal with the peripherals of the cultural sort of waves or ripple effects it has. So for example, if the tradition is that if a woman doesn't engage in this practice, she may not find a suitable husband, or she may not get married later on in life. And therefore, the sort of rituals and the cultural traditions around that particular act has to also evolve. And we need to raise sons and daughters with certain values that are much more conducive to that sort of equality, so that they don't feel forced to engage in those cultural practices that may not be good for them. Baria, what keeps you up at night?
Oh God, so many things. First, family, because I live away now. Everybody lives in their bubble in different countries, my family. But I'm a political journalist, so
Yes.
really so much keeps me up at night, especially the possibility of war in the region of the Middle East or anywhere in the world. And as we know, we have few mad men as presidents and prime ministers, etc., around the world. That scares me. I think the next 2 months are really scary around the Middle East, especially that the world is full of refugees and wars and people women who are displaced. The victims of wars are really the women and the children more than anybody else. Of course, the men fight, etc. But I think the women bear a big brunt of that. So a lot keeps me awake at night. The way that the world is now dealing with journalism and this fake news phenomena that has been there forever, but of course it has been strengthened by President Trump. As a journalist, I find this really difficult to believe, especially when you look at numbers around the world and feel how many millions of people are actually affected and believing in fake news. So
Correct.
it's
And also,
disturbing.
right, and also the sheer volume of content that we are confronted by, right? So our generation, what we receive in a week, perhaps in previous generations, our ancestors received in a lifetime. And then to have to sift through that and to have enough critical thinking to be able to search not only for what is easily accessible, but really to search for an objective view makes all our jobs that much tougher. I think Peaches was also referring to how the pandemic and COVID keeps her up at night. And of course, we know that women have been hit the hardest in the pandemic because they have to take care of homeschooling, they have to take care of their jobs, they take care of their existing roles and responsibilities.
And the abuse that has increased against them.
Correct.
And also the economic fall down, they are the ones that have lost more jobs, are getting less paid, those who have part-time jobs. So yes, women.
Correct, absolutely. Thank you. Well, let's see what we can do about all these things that keep us awake at night, and if we can try and get some.
And I'm sorry about the problem with the link before, and so I hope I'm with you now. I'm sorry.
You are with us. You are absolutely with us with a beautiful color dress that you're wearing. That's such a beautiful color. Thank you very much. Peaches, if I may ask you, can you tell me how your familial background and what an interesting and wonderful sort of family structure and background that you've had that I'm sure has influenced you in many ways. But if you could tell me your familial background and your unique experiences, how has it shaped your passion and purpose for the work that you do in the space of equality and rights?
Well, now that's a very long story, and I'm not sure how far back to begin. So I'll make it very short, and I'll start with my father, who was the 3 of 13 children of his parents. all of which grew up in the area where the slave plantation used to be. So it's very close to that sort of family route. And at a time when they didn't educate young Black people beyond the age of 8. Well, I'm delighted to say that all of my grandmother's children graduated from high school. Many of them graduated from university. And my father was amongst that lot. After a wee spell in the army during World War II, having been in the D-Day landings, and having been refused on 3 occasions to become an officer, even though he passed the exams, Dad used his income to get his doctorate degree. And as I was growing up, I knew him as a university professor. But before that, he was the second person in the US to refuse to sit at the back of the bus. And most people know Rosa Parks for having been the third person about a decade later. And after some concerted effort, which said, if we're going to get a law that works, we really need to pile in behind her. So that's the quick answer. How did it influence me? I guess it meant try to understand the law, try to understand where the boundaries are, and know when you're sailing too close to it, when you've surpassed it, or how much further you might be able to go. Yes, education and legal and financial, don't forget financial education, are extremely important, especially for women.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Peaches. What an inspiring story. And for those of you who haven't read Peaches' story and the issues or this, the sort of the characteristics of your background, I really would recommend that and encourage that you do. It is absolutely inspiring. Fiona, can you tell me, in your industry and the work that you've done, what kind of challenges did you face that maybe those of us listening could relate to? And perhaps you could maybe, towards the end, then highlight some of the sort of changes that you're happy to see, the sort of progression, the progress that we've made, but things that existed then perhaps may still exist. What are those challenges?
Well, there are about 5 questions in there.
So challenges you experienced from your industry.
I don't often feel that it's appropriate to talk about the past, because my past is a long time ago, and the world is a very different place now. And maybe I managed to progress my career with the benefit of some lovely and talented people, most of whom, if not all of them, were men, who basically wouldn't let me say no. There was a famous occasion which Baria might be amused about, when the senior partner came into my room and said, "Would you like to go and work in the Bahrain office in a week's time? Or put another way, will you please book a flight to Bahrain in a week's time, because we're short of resource there." And my reaction was, "You can't send a woman there." And he said, "Oh, I think you'll find it's a lot of fun, and you'll enjoy it, and the people are great." My motto in life has been, get lucky and say yes.
Did you enjoy it, Fiona?
I loved it. I loved it. I learned a huge amount, and the saying yes does involve you getting out of your comfort zone. But my goodness me, the satisfaction of feeling that you've risen to a challenge and seized an opportunity is something that I love telling my young people about whenever I get the opportunity. Daniel is always good at telling people that if they're helpful, they do their work well, people will come to them to help them progress. And you know, and this agenda is absolutely huge. My main work at the moment is on something which I think, particularly in law firms, needs sorting, which is the pipeline of talent. I mean, we've got some amazing women up there who do some wonderful things and are fantastic role models in most unusual places. I mean, the electricity industry, actually, in the system operator that keeps the lights on, it seems to be, all the work seems to be done by women. And you worry that there aren't enough women graduates. But the fact of the matter is there just aren't enough of us in senior positions yet. And you have to look at what's holding the talent in the pipeline or forcing the talent to leak out. There are lots of women I know who just actually after a while can't stand the lack of inclusive leadership by the keepers of the talent pipeline, and they get bored and leave. And I'm fond also of saying, don't focus on fixing the women, they're fine. Let's fix the workplace practices and get on with that. I'm not sure if that's answered any of your questions.
Of course it has. No, absolutely. And there's definitely treasures and nuggets of very helpful insights in what you have provided to us, of course. And it reminds me, earlier, I was in a session with Claire Balding and Alice Arnold. You mentioned the idea of support. And you said the importance of working together with the men and you know, the supportive men throughout all our careers who have helped us. And they were talking about the importance of women supporting one another as well. And I think that sometimes, you know, when I work with younger generations, I often get asked this question, and they say, you know, we have a good experience working with men, but sometimes we find that women are not very good at supporting one another. Do you think that isn't the case in the industries that you have perhaps you've worked in? And why is that? And what could we do to change that? What could we do for women to be more supportive of each other's endeavors and to be mentors to one another and to help open doors for one another? And I'd like to put that question out to any of the ladies who would like to answer.
I mean, I can easily tell you that when I started journalism back in Lebanon, there were hardly any women anyway. You know, women were scarce, and it wasn't a job that my parents exactly wanted me to do. Journalism at the time was not looked as what it is today. I wanted to be a lawyer, but there was you couldn't study law at the American University, so I studied political science and mass communication. Women don't generally support other women, and I, as a political journalist, especially when I'm in general evenings, like I'm traveling, especially in the Middle East, women are not politically oriented. I find myself that I'm like in a position where I cannot really converse because I don't talk much about what they talk about. But I think the thing about women versus women is changing and changing rapidly. I think women are realizing that more of them are coming to the workplace and they do need to support each other. I find that being a journalist, I'm definitely more supportive of my other female journalists. I think I also get quite a lot of support from other ladies, but it's changing slowly because there is a fear maybe this female will come and take my place and I really need to reserve my place, which I think is damaging to us as women. When we reach a stage where women really believe in their talent and in themselves and really have self-confidence, this is when this culture of women against women or whatever, and also this story, men and women, I really don't buy it anymore. We as mothers, I mean, I have 2 stepsons and 2 daughters, and I can assure you that I treated them exactly the same in many ways, although coming from a culture of the Middle East that you don't do that. Luckily, they grew up here in England. I've been living here for 40 years. They have absolutely amazing confidence, my daughters. And I'm so proud of that, because I think this is what pushes them to come forward and to come on. And I sometimes find it difficult to speak about my family, but I'm going to share something with you and the wider today. My daughter Amal, known as Amal Clooney, not Amal Alamuddin, has won this journalist award, the Woman of the Year, of the Journalist of the Year award. And I couldn't sleep out of joy, and it was given to her by somebody I really respect, Meryl Streep, who's a wonderful, respected actress. So I know one of the questions that we're supposed to answer is basically to say who is our role model, and my mother has always been my role model, of course, because she was really amongst the very first women to graduate from university. People used to come and see her degree, but I find the more I look at my children, my girls, my grandchildren, I mean, my God, my granddaughter, she's 17, she's already studying law. I can't speak to her because she's busy doing this, doing that. I have Ella, who's 3 years old, who commands the whole family, more or less. There is something that women's confidence it gives us passion. It gives us also, it helps us to go on and to pursue whatever we believe in.
And it's contagious, isn't it? That kind of light and radiates, and it's contagious. And we want to get more involved. Peaches, is there anything about how women can support one another? Because I also want our listeners to go away with some tools, of practical advice. What can we do more of?
Well, to just continue on that previous point, I had a very good boss. For 2.5 decades, we worked together. And we worked together encouraging businesses to be aware of their corporate responsibility. And she was one of the best bosses I've had. And some of the reasons were, to answer your question, she developed talent. She was a person who had 1,000 ideas before breakfast. About 900 of them were possible. About 150 were illegal. And about the other 50 were doable. But she was tremendous. So she talked about creativity and innovation just by the way she led the organization of 350, 400 people. She looked at people's talents and helped you to identify what your talents were. She told me, Peaches, you're a very good salesperson. Well, I never considered myself to be a salesperson. I am a zoologist. But she found that I had an ability to do whatever it was required to make the sale and to get the sale and to keep the customer happy and to develop products for the customers and all of those types of things that are important. And it was her actually articulating that. So some of the things that women can do is we can mentor, we can coach, we can train. We're very good at all of those sorts of skills. We can listen to what people are saying and help them to problem solve.
Absolutely.
Help them to sort out their own questions and feelings and aspirations and expectations, and to help them to become better people. So I think there are lots of things that women in leadership positions can do, but the most important is to enable men to be good coaches and mentors and advocates for women, and to help open those doors and give people the opportunities to pilot projects, to lead projects, to develop other people and develop themselves.
Absolutely. And I think, what you've hit on here is this notion of celebrating diversity and making sure that there's, when we talk about inclusive leadership and diversity, we're not just talking about gender and race. We're also talking about diversity in skills. We're talking about diversity. Are you an extrovert or an introvert? How do you brainstorm? How are you creative? And a good leader, a good mentor has a great antenna for that and articulates it and brings it to our attention. I had a similar story. I remember one of my professors at university, I was maybe 19 or 20 years old, who said to me, you should go into education. You know, one day I think you're going to make a good lecturer at university or a professor, and just planting that seed in my mind. And I'm forever grateful to her because she believed in me and she saw something in me that I may not have seen, but yet put me on the track for the rest of my career to be able to engage in that. So it is very, very powerful. Yeah. Fiona,
if I may just pick up a point that Peaches rightly made, which is that we are actually talking about talent development in the workplace. And one of the great things that the Lord Mayor's Power of Diversity program is focusing now is how you measure that in people. When you set them targets, so many times the targets and their bonuses depend upon them meeting these targets, are really only a numbers game of so much revenue, or in the law, so many chargeable hours, or what have you. And yet actually most businesses, especially in the services sector, are people businesses and crucially depend upon the talent growing and developing and being brought out. So those people who are keepers of the talent pipeline should be measured on their ability to develop talent as much as they are on their ability to develop the income. And we've developed some measures to do that. But for the most part, currently the so-called balanced scorecard is heavily weighted in favor of the income and not in favor of the people. And I would argue that people are actually more important than the income for the sustainability of the business and for the generation of that income. And Hult and other business schools have been focusing on this and have management techniques to tell people how to manage their teams in a way that is kind of on the job, reflects the fact that the keepers of the talent pipeline are still worker bees. They're very busy doing the work, and they'd rather do the work themselves, really, because they haven't been trained in leadership and they haven't been trained in talent development. So you and your colleagues, Sam, have the world in your hands in terms of the transformation of working place practices.
Thank you very much, Fiona.
I actually teach communications, and I've been to Hult, and I actually spoke to a group of your students in Zurich a few years ago.
How did I miss this beautiful opportunity?
Yeah, so no, I don't know if you were there. There was a gentleman who was the head, and I had like beautiful setting, by the way, amazing. And I find that people, and this is also, that brings me to my other daughter, Tala, who's doing some work in Indonesia with the poor women that have lost their husbands or have divorced. And usually the society really just leaves them to raise the kids, and they have no money, etc. And she was very happy to train them in how to do bags and little, things here and there. And it's unbelievable how much talent there is. Mm-hmm. And when you talk to them, and immediately the first thing they say, no, I can't do that. I've never done this. I don't know if I can go to work. I don't know if my society will allow me to work. And then suddenly you discover so many talents, and these women are in a completely different place now that they are working. They are providing for their children, they're providing for themselves, and it is like turning their lives topsy-turvy, because with economic empowerment also comes self-confidence. I find. I think the leadership courses are very important. I sometimes meet somebody who has 10 doctorate degrees but cannot communicate. That's no good. It doesn't work.
That's right. That's right. And nowadays what we're emphasizing here is not only characteristics, not just attributes, but practices. So when we say, someone is exemplary, we don't look at, the fact that they're honest or the fact that they are nice people. That's great. Those are great principles and characteristics to have. But I want to know, what do they do on a daily basis? What are the practices that they engage in that makes them exemplary? For example, are they good at listening? Are they agile and able to embrace change? Do they have a good level of self-awareness, you know, about who they are and what they'd like to accomplish? Are they good at resolving conflict? You know, these are the kinds of skills and the competencies that Fiona is talking about in terms of this is what we have to build for the future generation so that they're able to be a little, you know, more capable and have the right tools to interact in that way with each other. I have a question for you, Baria, and it's so interesting. You've sat across many interesting, unique individuals, impressive, accomplished women and men from different walks of life. Talking about practices and characteristics, what do you think sets those women apart from others? What are some things that we can learn from the way they do things that you have noticed that could be identified?
Yeah, I mean, I have interviewed many people, and currently I'm writing a book about Saudi women, and I've interviewed so far 2,200 women. And when I went to Saudi Arabia, I actually went in with the same attitude that many people have, the stereotyping of these women, that they don't do anything, and the rich ones or the princesses, they sleep all day, or I was fascinated, and I think maybe Dame Fiona would agree with me, because she probably have met a few people. I mean, Bahrain is quite different than other Gulf countries. Their education started much earlier, but not that many different. And when I started my research like 3-4 years ago, and I'm now, I'm fascinated by how quickly society is changing, because women is changing. 57% of graduates in Saudi, for example, universities, are women, and they're in everything. They literally control the economy now, literally. But I want to talk about some very important also women that I interviewed, and I was the last journalist to interview Indira Gandhi before she died. And I went to India with this idea that, you know, grandness, and it's the Queen of England, it's all these palaces that I'm used to seeing. And then when I met her on this, I was put on with her on this plane, very old Russian plane, and the noise was deafening and everything. And then the minute I was sat there with Peter Ustinov, the very famous actor who was supposed to interview her, and I took his place the next day because I was a woman, and he wanted to help me. And then suddenly when I sat with her and I spoke to her, she was this tiny woman dressed in the simplest cotton sari you can ever imagine, with the saddest eyes I had ever seen in my life. When she spoke, I followed her. I was with her on that trip to Orissa State for the last 3 days of her life. And then when we arrived back in Delhi, I left her at 12. She died at 9 in her garden the next day. So I had the last voice recording, the last picture, everything. I was mesmerized by how strong she was, the belief in her country and her people I had not seen in any others. And I also became friends with Benazir Bhutto, who's one of the most charming leaders, very worldly, very interesting, and also I remember having lunch with her and my 2 daughters before she left, because I wanted her to, and she knew that she could die. And she said, my children are scared. I said, but aren't you scared? She said, look, let me tell you something. I'm doing this for democracy. It's for my country. It's for my, so this belief, knowing that she could die for real, because she was told that you could die, or that she knew.
Right. So, and what you're saying is that this idea that what is identifiable in these 2 cases is this commitment, is the courage, but also the humility. There's a humbleness that you think that goes a long way. And we see it in people like Jacinda, who's Prime Minister of New Zealand, correct? Right. And she's especially during the pandemic as well, you know, the kind of emotionally intelligent and humble persona that comes across is very inspiring. Thank you very much.
You can't be great if you are not humble. You
Yes.
cannot be great if you are not
Agreed.
humble.
Agreed, absolutely. So just, Tara is here. Tara, may I ask one final question, because we started a bit late? Is that okay, or would you like us to wrap up?
Please, it's been amazing listening.
It's okay. So I just wanted to wrap up by saying, we all know we have challenges. We have had challenges. We have made great progress. And we know that, you know, it's not over yet. And we have to be conscious of some of the barriers that come our way. What would be your advice to our listeners about coping mechanisms? So when we are confronted with injustice or any kind of difficulty that may encounter us, what would be your advice for women to keep pushing and not give up? Who would like to start? Fiona, would you like to start, please?
Yes, I think we've touched on this already, which is that we shouldn't recoil in horror and then think, well, you know, maybe my husband can keep me and I can be a lady who lunches, because I don't think the best husbands don't want that either. I think what we're looking at is finding the courage to engage with the issues, but also actually there's a bit of sort of I don't think it's the Sheryl Sandberg lean in, but it's more a bit about sort of gritting your teeth and working through the issues. I mean, I'm a great believer in lists. There are lists littered all over the house with my to-do things. And a lot of the issues that women face is actually too many roles in only 24 hours a day, and not quite sure which are the best priorities. So should I be spending a little bit more time with my number two, or my PA or my team, or should I be spending a bit more time with my kids or my mother?
Fantastic. Okay, so we've got have a growth mindset, stay engaged and keep going, and also prioritize. Thank you, Fiona. Peaches?
Well, I'd also say be clear about your purpose and try to align what you do with your purpose. I think my purpose is to help create a fairer and a more just society. And I figure when I'm doing that, I kind of know where I am and I know what my grounding is. Second thing is about being prepared. And there's nothing better than actually doing the work beforehand so that you can understand what situation you may be walking into. And I guess the last thing is to keep a routine. And certainly during lockdown, I've found it's very important. Have breakfast, know what time you're going to have a cup of tea, have lunch, know what time you're going to have a cup of coffee, you know, just make sure that you get some exercise in, you know, just have a good routine that helps you keep on track, enables you to relax and exhale, and also to see friends and family and those you love.
So try and remain connected in the way that we can, and also carve out some predictability and controllability in a time in which, you know, we often feel out of control or things feel unpredictable. Thank you very much, Peaches. Baria?
Oh my God, if money can buy time, I'll buy time. But also with hindsight, I think one realizes how important family is. But for me, it's all about time organizing. You know, you have to really organize and to realize that now, for example, I cannot get my family always next to me where I want them to be. They're all over the world doing all the good work they do, being very proud. So if I had to plan things again, I would have probably given priority more to my family at certain times in my life. But focus, passion. I think I cannot imagine life without passion. For me, passion drives me to do everything. And of course, justice around the world. So these things really are very important to me. And time, I wish I had more time.
Yep. Well, it's what we do with that time that counts. And it's clear, ladies, that you have done exemplary work throughout your career and continuing in doing that exemplary work. Again, thank you very much, Tara and Daniel, for allowing me to ask these very impressive ladies some questions. I hope that we have benefited from the discussion, and thank you again for your presence. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you
You've
so
been an
much.
incredible
Beaches,
moderator.
thank you. Can I just say to Beaches, I'm very jealous from the background, from your flowers.
Yes, you see, this is my husband's handiwork, but
We like your husband.
Yeah, I love my husband.
Ladies, thank you all so much. Thank you to Sam for moderating. Thank you, Peaches, Baria, and Dame Fiona. Amazing stories. Thank you so much for being a part of Created Forum. It's been invaluable listening to you guys. We're going to now see a video from Baroness Patricia Scotland's hashtag Commonwealth says no more domestic abuse. And then we will go to our sixth panel.
Violence against women and girls is a serious issue that affects 1 in 3 women around the world.
Some places, the prevalence may even be higher and distressingly concerning.
That violence is a pernicious blight on the ability of women and girls, children, everywhere.
It also takes a huge toll on children, families, and communities.
Amongst the consequences of measures implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic have been alarming rises in domestic and sexual violence.
We've been forced to isolate with their abusive partner. Sometimes we hear these names in the news, often when there's a tragic ending.
Homes are no longer the safest place.
COVID-19 is exacerbating a human travesty of women's rights.
This cannot continue. It has to stop.
For far too long, society has not done nearly enough.
For too long.
Our society has not done enough to resist it.
For far too long, we've been so quiet about violence against women. For too long, people have looked the other way. For too long, people have shamed the victim and said it's their fault.
For too long, people have said you must have done something to deserve it.
For too long, people have said it's a private matter. For too long, there is shame attached to the experiences that stop women and girls from speaking up and getting help.
There is never a time or circumstance where this societal evil is acceptable.
That's why we are saying no more to such violence.
My name is Shabana Azmi.
Irfan,
And Awairin.
Isaac Muhammad Didi,
Amacha, Nina Gurifaki, Johnson,
Brian Johnson,
Jerry Horner,
Sir Rodney Williams,
Betsy Ali.
Nina Wadir.
I'm Helen Clark, and I'm pleased to lend my name to the Commonwealth's campaign to stop domestic and sexual violence in the Commonwealth.
Today, as an initial step, we're unveiling a portal full of resources for anybody to see, as well as the first directory of gender-based violence services throughout the Commonwealth.
it is part of our wider Commonwealth Says No More campaign.
Where you can access legal aid, seek help, hopefully eventually escape these horrible situations. Let us rise together, women and men, shifting attitudes and behaviour, and collectively saying no more.
No more to domestic and sexual violence. No more shame.
no more blame.
No more to terror in our homes.
No more excuses.
No more lip service.
You can and must do better.
We will get this scourge in our society out, and we will do the best that we can to make sure those women and children have a better future.
Please join me in committing to speaking up.
In taking the pledge at Commonwealth Says No More.
You can do this by creating and sharing your own No More post.
By joining together, we can bring the scourge of domestic and sexual violence to an end for good.
For more information,
To take the pledge with me, you can visit commonwealthsaysnomore.org.